All right, we are live for another episode of Two Guys Talking Sports. There's a lot to get into today, Stephen. Big week of college football. A lot of noise surrounding the NIL this week with UNLV and kind of what transpired with their now departed quarterback. We got Sunday round, final round of the President's Cup. Got NFL going on. There's a lot that it's kind of happy. You don't have to worry about your Cowboys today since they did win on Thursday Night Football. Decked in your Braves gear. There's a lot going on in the MLB world as we enter technically into the final day of the MLB season. The Braves still very well could play a doubleheader tomorrow, but hopefully it's not going to be needed. We can go and clinch that wild card spot today. That way, you don't have to worry about it. But there's still a scenario where we may have to play a game tomorrow, even if we do clinch today. So, but we let's secure the wild card spot today. That way, if we do have to play tomorrow, just throw an arm we don't necessarily need.
Exactly.
So we're going to jump right into it, get us going. Clemson with a big time win last night, I guess you could say. With the win over Stanford, and before we kind of jump into that, just our thoughts and prayers are with everybody in the Southeast that have been impacted by the hurricane. There's a lot of, fuss that, if Clemson should, or there should even have been football in Clemson yesterday. I know there was an issue at the Citadel game with, I believe they played East Tennessee State, with them getting into town. Stanford didn't even get into town until like around 7:00 Friday night. And I think they're supposed to depart Thursday. So, and then with resources having to get moved around, I know there were a lot of people on Twitter, didn't even think that the game should have been played. I feel like that's just like a lose-lose situation where, they're basically inviting the fans to come, but, to get, ice and stuff from out of town where it's taking resources from people who still don't have power. So, our thoughts are with everybody that have been affected by it. It's a tough scene seeing all those videos and photos of roads being washed out in North Carolina. So, hopefully they can find some form of normalcy, I guess you could say, here in the near future, but definitely bleak times ahead. So, but again, getting into the Clemson game, I don't know what happened to my ticker. I had a stuff with Clemson on it, but I guess I must have deleted it by accident. I don't know. But a strong showing for the Clemson Tigers last night. 40-14 win over the Stanford Cardinals. It's still weird seeing Stanford in the ACC when they're, out on the West Coast in California.
Exactly.
But again,
West Coast, a team that's literally on the West Coast is now a part of the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yeah, the whole, and this is a whole nother conversation, but it just goes to show you what college sports are going. It's all centered around football. Yeah. And, it makes no sense that, for football, I guess I understand it, but for the other sports, it's like, a lot of these people stay in that area because family can travel because, that's teams they were playing on the West Coast. Now they're having to go all the way across the country. Yeah. But again, a strong win for Clemson. I thought it was a close game for a little bit. Some stupid turnover mistakes by Stanford really kind of gave the game to Clemson, in my opinion. But Clemson, at the end of the day, did what they needed to do to win. Steven, did you get to watch any of it?
A little bit. I was paying more attention to the Braves at the time. But, yeah, it seems like Clemson's offense is kind of finding their footing a little bit more. I still am kind of weary to say, like, they're back because, again, like, what's the competition level with Stanford, Yeah. And it seems like the last three games where the offense has looked extremely good or has looked better, you look at the competition, you're just like, well, is it some of that or is it that they are just really good offensively now, or it's kind of hard to tell. And I still think we won't know fully about Clemson's offense until they play Louisville. And I'm not sure, is that this coming up week?
No, I think they have Florida State this weekend, and then it's followed with Louisville.
Yeah. So, again, they're not going to have much of a test with Florida State. So we'll see. I mean, obviously they're doing what you want to do in games like this, which, we've said it before with South Carolina. There's times when we played, down to our opponent, but it seems like Clemson's not doing that, which is a good sign because you want to be able to stay consistent no matter who you're playing. So I think offensively they're doing better.
Yeah, and honestly, at the beginning of the game, truthfully, up until the late third quarter, entering the fourth quarter, there was really nothing special about Clemson's offense, and I was like, "Oh, here we go." Cade they had such a great 2 games against App State and NC State, and in retrospect, those were kind of, you would never expect them to be as bad as they are, but that's what it is. They couldn't really run the ball that much at the beginning. Stanford, come in and had one of the best rush defenses in the country. And it did show, but Clemson did a great job of executing and capitalizing on the stupid turnovers that Stanford made. Yeah. And, that kind of starts off the recap where Stanford goes for it on their own half or side of the field, goes for it on 4th and 1. The quarterback fumbles the ball, and then 2 plays later, Cade, breaks off a 34-yard rushing touchdown.
Yeah.
Stanford then gets the ball back, drives. I mean, they're in the red zone. I believe they're inside the 10, inside the 5-yard line, and the quarterback makes a stupid pass.
Mike's out.
What about now?
There we go.
Okay, I think there's a button here. I think I might have hit it. But, Stanford's driving down the field. They're inside the red zone, and the quarterback throws a stupid interception. Clemson comes back with a big pass from Cade to, I believe it was to Bryant Westco, the true freshman. They managed to get a field goal out of it. But it just seemed to, as the game went on, Stanford couldn't get out of their own way. And it's kind of that, the coach for Stanford has a reputation of being an aggressive coach, kind of like a Dan Campbell with the lines. I don't know, like that just, it seems to me like you got to find a time and place to do that. And,
Right.
I know they probably, as the game wore on, they're like, okay, we got to try to get something going. But it seemed to be every time Stanford had something going and moving, they'd have a stupid penalty, or a turnover, because I believe it was like 2 drives later, the quarterback for Stanford I don't know if he tried to throw it away or force another ball, but he threw another interception inside Clemson's, inside the red zone. And it just, and Clemson did a great job of capitalizing on that. And then, as the game wore on and Clemson's defense kind of started, adjusting but towards the end of the third quarter and the beginning of the fourth quarter, Clemson really just pulled away.
Yeah, it's just, obviously I think Stanford's in a position where if they want to be competitive, they're going to have to be extremely aggressive. But again, you got to know, like I said, Dan Campbell's good at it. He knows when to be gutsy and ballsy about his calls. And he also knows that he's got the players to do it.
Yeah.
When you got a good team, you can be aggressive and you can take those risks. It just seems like Stanford's kind of struggling. So it's kind of hard. But again, if you want to be competitive with teams like Clemson, I guess you got to kind of be aggressive and take chances to stick with them. But unfortunately, when you do that and you have turnovers, you have a team who, in Clemson, they're doing what they're supposed to do, get the turnovers and then immediately score off of them. That's what you want from your team. So,
yeah. And I mean, Stanford did a great job moving the ball against Clemson. I think they had over 236 yards rushing against Clemson, which is kind of, you never really see that. And like I said, Stanford had success moving the ball against Clemson. But again, just like you said, the turnovers just ended up being too
it's
much
hard to
for
win.
them to overcome.
Yeah, it's hard to win football games whenever you're turning the ball over multiple times.
And in big spots,
it doesn't matter how good you are. If you've got multiple turnovers throughout a game, it's tough to win football.
And it's where you turn the ball over. Like I said, these were sustaining drives where they could have scored or put points up on the board. There's no guarantee they would score a touchdown.
Right.
But it completely changes the mindset of the game, and where it's Clemson may be playing, may have a game going on, and they just get these key turnovers, and it just Stanford just couldn't overcome it. They're just not that strong of a team. But like you said, Clemson did what they needed to do to win. It wasn't the prettiest, the score looks like it was a big blowout, and
Yeah.
it ended up being a blowout towards the end of the game. But really, for 2.5, 3 quarters, it was a close game. Clemson took a 17-7 lead going into halftime, and I really thought Stanford had a chance, but again, the turnovers, and just not sustaining any drives, and Clemson kind of you know kind of putting their foot on the gas.
Yeah.
Really just ended up being all they needed to win, and again, it was a big win. You can argue their schedule all day long. It's a very favorable schedule, and honestly, after the Miami Virginia Tech game on Friday night, I really truly think this is Clemson's conference to lose.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they seem like, at least over the last 3 games, that they're the most consistent team in the ACC.
Yeah.
Because honestly, you can't just say it about Clemson. Everybody in the ACC that's playing an ACC schedule is pretty much playing a favorable schedule because, unless they have some, non-conference games that are tougher. But yeah, I mean, if you're playing an ACC schedule right now, it's pretty much favorable for anyone. And if you look at the ACC as a whole, you have to say, well, Clemson is probably the most consistent right now in the conference.
Yeah, and Miami needed somewhat of a miracle to beat Virginia Tech team that lost to Vanderbilt, which SEC fans know Vanderbilt is usually on the bottom tier of the SEC. And did you see that that kind of final play of the Miami Virginia Tech game?
Yes.
I can't remember. I think I was watching. It was a college football podcast recap after the Georgia Alabama game ended last night, and they brought up a great point where it's why do the referees have to make a call on the field? Like there's nobody in really a great position to see what happened, or what the end result could have been, like whether it was a touchdown or incomplete pass or interception. Why not say, hey, nobody has a good read on this. We're going to go to video review and determine what happened instead of calling, because once you make the play, or once you make the call, whether it's a touchdown, interception, incomplete pass, when you go to video review, you have to have substantial evidence to overturn that call. You can't be, oh, it doesn't look like a touchdown, so we're going to call it incomplete. No, it has to be enough to where it has to offset what you're calling. And I mean, it was just an entire disaster all around. I think they got the call right, but when you call it a touchdown, there has to be enough evidence to overturn it. And it just, I don't know, like I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, we don't know. Let's go back. Let's look at the replay and make a call there. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't really know what the rules are. Maybe the rules is like you have to make a call on the field before anything can go to replay. Yeah. That could be what the rules are. We just don't know because you've never really
changed that.
Yeah, you've never really got into this situation where there was like a call where the refs, where it's kind of like clear as day, like the refs probably didn't have a good view at it. It's very rare. But yeah, I think that it should be, if that is the thing where you have to have a ruling on the field first, there should be like at least circumstances where you say, look, as the referee crew, we don't know, so let's just send it to review, let them have all the camera angles, and let them determine a call. Yeah. And maybe it's on touchdowns. Maybe it's only on plays that end up in the end zone or something like that, because it would be tough to do every single catch or every single play that happens where
but
potentially the refs say, I don't know.
They're like 8 people all around, like huddled around this play that was happening, and it's tough to see in real time because everything happens so fast. But when you get replay involved, it's slowed down. There's many different camera angles you can look at. I don't know. It's kind of like a VAR in soccer that we see, where there's still a play, like there's still something called, but I don't know, like. I think they have to call something, like they have to make a ruling. But again, it's like once you make that call, you have to have enough evidence to overturn it. I went to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, and there's like a little display in there where you can be a referee and there's like different scenarios you can choose from, and there's a challenge on the play, and you have to review it and see if it should stand or if it should be overturned. And it's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah.
But once you see everything, but I agree with that person's take where I think it should be when it's a specific scenario where you just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, and it's not going to happen all the time, but what happened on Friday is a great example of that, where I think that should be something where it should go to review to determine if what the play call is going to be.
Yeah, I think it should be
or the ruling.
circumstantial, where you say if a scoring play or turnovers. If we just don't know for sure, we can send it straight to review.
Yeah,
because they do have, every play is reviewed, even if they don't send it to review. Because you'll see a lot of times where they don't even go to review. They just call it down and say, nope, that wasn't a catch. Replay the down or something like that. So I think it should be circumstantial on that. But there should be certain times where you say, we don't know. Let's don't screw this up. Let's just send it for all the angles and see what they come up with.
Yeah, and I think Clemson's kind of bought themselves back, in my opinion, back into the top 10 conversation. Because, like I said, I mean, outside the Georgia game, they've looked really good, in my opinion. And you can argue if it's related to play calling, who was really in charge of the play calling, if Dabo really had his hands involved in the play, like in the game or the game plan of calling the plays. But I mean, Clemson's rolling, and it's like I said, it doesn't really get difficult for them on the schedule. Like I said, you can argue Virginia Tech may be a little bit better of a game after the way they played against Miami, but on paper, Louisville lost up to Notre Dame yesterday. They've got go to Florida State, then to go to Wake Forest, then Virginia. So those are should be three easy wins, because Florida State is just a dumpster fire right now.
They are.
And Wake Forest is a pretty not so good football team either. It's crazy how far they've fallen in the past couple of years after when they had, what was it, Sam Hartman?
Yeah.
And so, but again, another good win for the Clemson Tigers. Let's jump into kind of college football as a whole. Yesterday, there was a lot of big time games yesterday that ended up having, the Georgia-Alabama game. I think it's safe to say so far was the game of the year.
Yeah.
I know you said you were watching the Braves game. Did you get to watch any of the Alabama?
Yeah, I watched it.
I know you kind of trolled me last night when I was texting you.
Well, I was keeping up with it on my phone, just score updates and stuff. But then once Georgia started coming back, and then there was that, the big touchdown where they took the lead, or I turned the game on then. So whatever the last 2 minutes or so were. But that was a wild game, because it seemed like Alabama just had it in the bag the whole time, and then come out flat in the second half. And you just can't do that against teams like Georgia. They're not going to quit.
No, and they make big time. They make adjustments.
Right.
Yeah,
and you could see that in the Clemson game. They didn't look great coming out in the first half of the Clemson game with Georgia, and then they come out second half, they make adjustments, and they blow them out the water. So it's not a team that you can just say, okay, we're up 2 or 3 scores. We got this game in the bag, because they can easily make adjustments and come right back on you. And you saw that last night. Yeah,
and it was such a. Alabama got out to a 21-0 lead in the first quarter, took a 30-7 lead into halftime, and honestly, I think Alabama kind of got ahead of themselves and tried to start playing more conservative, and Georgia. All credit to Georgia, they didn't give up. They just bear down. The quarterback's name is slipping my mind now. Carson Beck didn't have a great start to the game. He still finished with 3 interceptions, but his first 2 were pretty atrocious. But I was very surprised with that game last night. With the way it started, especially the way Georgia plays, you never would have expected something like that to happen. Right. Alabama's replacing a legend in Nick Saban. I think they honestly, behind Kirby Smart, I think Kalen DeBoer is probably the second best coach in college football. But you never know what's going to happen with the program that replaces a legend like Nick Saban. There might be some fall. So this was the first real true test for Alabama, and luckily it was at home, and it started as just about as good as you could want it as an Alabama fan, and vice versa. It could have started any worse for a Georgia fan. I mean, Jalen Milroe looked like the Heisman favorite for about the first half, and then they kind of hit like a slow patch, and then they turn it back on. But that receiver for Alabama, he's 17 years old.
That's crazy.
He can't vote. He can't buy tobacco. He can't do anything.
Yeah.
And the fact that he
can run full speed and turn a 360 on a dime and catch a football pass.
Man, that kid is talented. And they said if he plays 3 years, he'll still be 20 years old going into the NFL.
Crazy.
But again, I don't think Georgia didn't play themselves out of a playoff spot last night. That was an argument. And I don't agree with Danny Cannell on a lot of stuff because he's very pro ACC, and I do kind of agree with a lot of the stuff he has takes related to the SEC, because I do feel like the more as long as we've been doing this show and started watching more, college football, there's some SEC team ranks like Texas A&M that have no business being ranked. But again, a big win for Alabama to come back, and where they allow the lead to slip away and bear down and come out with that W. It's a big win because the schedule doesn't get easier for Georgia. They still have to play Texas, Tennessee, Auburn, which they're a dumpster fire right now. Let's see. No, that's not what I wanted.
Hey, while you look that up, I'm gonna switch to my phone. So I'm gonna come off for a minute and switch to my phone. My computer's about to die.
Okay, no problem.
I'm gonna join on my phone and give me about 2 minutes.
You're good. You good. So the point I was making with Georgia, and while we're waiting on Stephen to come back on, Georgia has to go to Texas, which is going to be a big time game. I don't know if Quinn Ewers is going to be healthy or not. Arch Manning has looked good, but again, there's a big difference when playing Mississippi State compared to Georgia, and they still have to play at Ole Miss, and they have Tennessee the next week. So it's still a tough road ahead for the Georgia Bulldogs. Again, I think the way they finished that game last night gives them a little bit more. Trying to think of the right word. Oh, let me add Stephen back on. There he is.
There we go.
So like I was saying, Georgia in 2 weeks on the 19th, they go. No, excuse me. That's never mind. Georgia goes to Texas next week.
Wow.
So it doesn't get any
easier.
No, excuse me. I'm sorry. I thought I was looking at Texas schedule. They play Georgia plays Mississippi State at home next weekend. Then they go on the road to Texas. Then they've got Florida at home, a bye week at Ole Miss. Then they've got Tennessee at home, UMass, and Georgia Tech. So not an easy schedule remaining for the Georgia Bulldogs. Like I said, we'll go ahead and jump into the Ole Miss game. As a Gamecock fan playing Ole Miss next weekend, I really don't know how I feel about this. I don't know. I don't know if it's something they're just going to come in motivated. But that Kentucky win for South Carolina looks better and better every week.
It's kind of like you don't like you feel like it looks better every single week, but then you're also like, did they just have an extremely bad game against us? Or the thing is, like, when people say that, like, oh, well, Kentucky just had an extremely bad game. Like, if you watch the game, South Carolina was dominant. Like, they didn't change. It's not like they got a whole new offensive line whenever they moved and have played the last 2 games. Like, South Carolina's defensive line was just able to apply so much pressure that they couldn't throw the ball. So it's not like, I mean, Kentucky's obviously made adjustments since the South Carolina game, but it's not like they revamped their entire team, in these last 2 games against Georgia and then now Ole Miss. So you do feel a lot better, going into this Ole Miss game.
Yeah.
It's not like it's an automatic win now just because Kentucky beats Ole Miss. You can't just say, okay, well, we're going to beat them, but you do feel a lot better, more comfortable, a little bit more confident, especially if you have Sellers back.
Yeah, and I honestly, this is just what happens when you just schedule cupcake games. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they open against Furman, no knock on Furman. Then they play Georgia Southern, Wake Forest. They don't play anybody, and then Kentucky had a big eye opening after they lost to South Carolina. I mean, and granted, I mean that was a dominating win by the Gamecocks.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of made Stoops and his staff kind of reassess what they're doing because they look dang good against Georgia and they look dang good against Ole Miss. And hopefully Beamer and his staff were watching what Kentucky did yesterday because I think they essentially outlaid the blueprint of how you need to attack Ole Miss, where
Mm-hmm.
you look at the time of possession, Kentucky won it 39 minutes, 43 seconds to 20 minutes and 17 seconds. They kept Ole Miss's offense off the field. And that's
Yeah.
what you're going to have to do because that first drive, and I didn't get to see it, but I think, Ole Miss moved it pretty quickly down the field and scored. And it
Which
was
that's how
just,
they've always been with
yeah,
Lane Kiffin. He wants to go fast.
yeah. But
And
you kind of
that's
have to,
all well and good whenever you go fast and you score, and then your defense
yeah,
gets you the ball right back and you go fast and you score.
yeah.
But if you go fast and you don't get points on the board and then
Mm-hmm,
your defense allows a long drive,
mm-hmm.
it's hard for an offense that's built on, speed, just basically rhythm plays to get into those rhythms when they're not out on the field a lot.
And they're used to dictating the terms of how the game goes. And
Yeah.
Kentucky took that clear out of their hands yesterday. I know a lot of Gamecock fans are looking forward to, and I'm looking forward to this game as well because you got Juice Wells.
He had a
That was,
great game yesterday
yeah,
too.
he was
He
targeted
really
two
showed out.
times,
Yeah.
0 catches, 0 receptions, and I think they were technically considered drops. But for people who may be watching or that follow this channel doesn't know the backstory with Juice Wells in South Carolina, he transferred to South Carolina from James Madison, 3 years ago, had a big breakout season his first year at Carolina. He had, and this is where things kind of get gray, where he had some health issues with his foot last year before the season began, couldn't really get healthy, and he bolted out the door to go to Ole Miss. And I understand his his reasoning to a certain degree, where it's like, you're losing somebody in Spencer Rattler. You've got Lenore Sellers coming in. You don't really know how he's going to be. But my issue is how he left. Like there, you can. It depends who you ask. Where some people say he was healthy enough to play, some people say he wasn't, and was and just essentially took money from South Carolina. We'll get into this with the NIL and everything here shortly. But I think it's how he left and kind of how
Yeah.
he got a big payday from the NIL collective with South Carolina and then just bolts out the door. And I think what makes it even better is when he's surprised that people are, excuse my language, pissed off at him for the way
Yeah.
he did it. And I really don't think he threw Lenore's under the bus or anything. But I mean, if you're looking at it from just a football perspective, you understand why he, maybe wanted to go to Ole Miss because that's a high-powered offense with Jackson Dart, who
Yeah.
coming into last year and this year had some Heisman consideration. But Gamecock fans are looking forward to this game. I wish it was a night game because that place would be rocking next Saturday
Yeah.
night. But it's a 3:30 game, so what you think on that?
Should on the game or on which game going into the South Carolina game?
Yeah, just the kind of the
Yeah.
build up going
I
into
think
next
that
Saturday.
obviously we looked good against an opponent that we should obviously beat. Finally, that's the thing is like and I said it earlier, South Carolina normally plays down to their opponent. And you have these games where it's just like a heart attack waiting to happen because you're like, we should be blowing this team out and we're not. But you finally had a game where you did, and you did it with a backup. So you've had a bye week this week, so you pretty much have 2 weeks to prepare for this. And then now you see Ole Miss come out with a dud and basically their first real competitive game.
Yeah.
It makes you feel a little bit better about that. I'm always kind of weary about my teams coming off of a bye, just because I like my teams to stay consistent because athletes are so routine based and so scheduled out that pretty much every single day of their lives are on a consistent schedule. You know what you're doing every single day, and then you kind of throw a
Yeah.
wrinkle in that. Yeah, you get some rest, but you throw a wrinkle in that where, okay, I'm off my kind of schedule, and then you
Yeah.
got to jump back into your schedule and then play a game. I think in the positions that we were hurt at, I think the bye week came at a good, very good time.
Mhm.
Um, Especially going into the games that we had to go into outside of, on the other side of the bye.
Yeah.
But I do feel a lot better. I'm not going to say, oh yeah, South Carolina should win this game, but I think that you feel a little bit better going into it than you did before the Kentucky Ole Miss game.
Yeah, and honestly, outside of it's crazy saying this, but outside traveling to Alabama and Clemson, I don't really know enough about the home field advantage for Oklahoma. Just watching them play, I'm not saying we're going to win these games, but we've got
Yeah,
with a lot of our big time games are at home, and that's a huge advantage for us. Not saying we're going to win or anything, but having these games, the way Ole Miss looked, the way Texas A&M has looked this year, the way Missouri's looked this year. Honestly, I'm scared about Vanderbilt. And
a
but
lot
we
of the games when we looked at the season before the season started and said, okay, we got to go. Ole Miss is who they are.
yeah,
Rank where they are. We got to go to Oklahoma. You got to play Missouri. You got to go to Clemson, to
yeah,
Alabama. When you looked at it before the season, you're
mhm,
like, all right, how are we even going to get 4 or 5 wins out of
yeah,
here? And now you're looking at these teams where you're seeing the improvement of South Carolina so far,
yeah.
and you're seeing that these teams aren't as scary as you thought they were going into the season. And you're looking and you're saying, okay, could we go 10-2?
Yeah. And I think this is a whole nother conversation for another
I'm
day.
not saying that we would, but you
But I
feel a
think,
little bit better about
yeah,
these games now.
but I think that's why these preseason polls are so, in my
I don't
opinion,
think you
unnecessary.
should even rank teams
There
until after
shouldn't
like the
be
second
any
week.
rankings until halfway through the season. Because
Yeah,
again, take Ole Miss for example. Their schedule. Let me pull it up real quick. They opened against Middle Tennessee State, then they played at Wake Forest, then they had Georgia Southern, and then they played Kentucky.
yeah,
I don't know why, but my app is cutting off games for some reason. And I know
yeah. The
that
rankings
their
though,
first game was not against Middle Tennessee State, but for some reason it's cutting it off. I think something's wrong with the app. But again, you look at Ole Miss's first 4 games and you think they're probably one of the best teams in the country. They're vying for a college football playoff spot,
yeah,
and then they have their first real test and they kind of lay a dud out.
yeah,
And you can say the same thing about the Heisman race, where you don't really know what these players are until they begin conference play or start facing real opponents.
yep,
And I think if you look in retrospect, this could have just been an anomaly for Ole Miss. Who knows? But they didn't look like the number 6 team in the country last night.
no,
When you look at the other teams that are in front of them, the Georgias, Alabama, who else was ranked ahead of them? Texas.
yeah,
So it's in Texas is going to have a good test in a couple weeks against Georgia. But give credit to Mark Stoops and his staff for the turnaround they had. It looked very bleak after their loss to South Carolina, and it wasn't just because they lost; it's how they lost. Like they couldn't generate
right,
anything on offense. So give a ton of credit to Stoops and his staff. But I think as being Gamecock fans, watching the way Kentucky's played since they've played us should give Gamecock fans a lot of hope that we do have a good football team.
yeah.
We're
I
not the
agree.
best team, but you and even take my words before the season started, we look a lot better than what I thought we would.
We look a lot better than I thought we would, and I'll also say something that we haven't seen normally from Beamer and his staff is that it seems like we improve every week.
Yeah,
Where in the past few seasons, it's just like you can see where the weaknesses are, and there's no improvement on it. But so far this season, you can see where the weaknesses are, and it's like each week they're a little bit better in those spots.
yeah,
And
I
I
agree.
think that's why you feel a little bit more comfortable going into these games now. One, because you know that you've seen progress.
Yeah.
And then you're also seeing these teams aren't as scary as what these preseason rankings put them at. And so, and here's the thing: is like Ole Miss, even if they did just, even if it was an anomaly, and they still got to come to South Carolina coming off of that. So your first real test for Ole Miss, it was at home for them, and they laid a dud. And then they got to go on the road against a team coming off of a bye, coming in with some confidence, and coming in also that you went and got a guy that pissed off an entire fan base and teammates at the same time. So there's a lot of emotion going into that game. So there's a lot that beginning of the season kind of wasn't favoring towards South Carolina, but it's kind of, teetering that it's right around 50-50.
Yeah. And so
I'm interested to see is the line out on this game yet?
I doubt it. I mean, there might be something.
It's got to be less than a touchdown.
But it can, let's see.
It's got to be less than a touchdown. Ole Miss will come in as a favorite for sure.
Yeah, nothing. No, at least on the Yahoo Sports app, there's no line out.
So let's say like 5.5. Ole Miss is what the line would be.
We'll see. I mean, I definitely, Carolina we're not ranked, but we're teetering on being ranked.
The new ESPN FPI, the Football Power Index that came out today, has South Carolina at 25.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll get into 2 more games to recap. We'll do Oklahoma, Auburn. I was kind of flipping back and forth with this one.
Yeah, I didn't see this one. I saw the scores, and then I saw Oklahoma won at the very end.
The fact that Oklahoma won this game with essentially no healthy receivers, and a true freshman quarterback starting on the road at Auburn, which was it's a very tough place to play. Like it's not a walk in the park at that place. And I mean, Auburn they were dominating, they were winning, they're up 21-10, and then to come back and lose like they did.
Yeah.
And I'm only going off the way they treated Brian Harsin at Auburn and the way kind of Hugh Freeze reacted after their loss to Arkansas last week, where he said, if we played them, he loves Arkansas, he loves Sam Pittman, but if they played them 9 times, they'd beat them 9 times. Well, sorry, that's not how it works. And he kind of, some people say he threw his players under the bus, the quarterback. He's like, we got to find a quarterback who can throw the ball, not throw interceptions. And I don't know, like the resources Auburn has, and they should be doing a lot better than what they are.
Right.
And credit to Brent Venables and kind of coming in as the underdogs with, like I said, really no healthy receivers, a true freshman quarterback. I was very surprised by that outcome yesterday, and we'll kind of leave it at that. I mean, I know you didn't watch too much of it. Do you have anything you want to say on it?
I think Auburn's not very good.
Yeah,
and I think again, this game was at Auburn, so that kind of leans in their favor. No matter what, it's always going to be a tough place to play. No matter what Auburn's record is, that's always a tough place to go in and play. But I think it tells a little bit more about Oklahoma. Yeah, they scratched out the win, but it's just like, what are they? 15 right now?
They were. I haven't seen new rankings.
To say that they're the top,
they were 21st yesterday, I believe, or they might still be 21st in the country.
They may be a top 25 team, but it's like they're not. Again, coming into the season, you would have thought, okay, it's Oklahoma. They always have that name behind them. That's just like, you got to be scared of Oklahoma.
That's why I hate preseason rankings. It's not based off anything.
Yeah, watching them play recently, it's just like, they're not as scary as what you would think.
No.
Not saying that South Carolina's going to go in and beat them again, but you got a little bit more confidence than you had going into the season.
And then the last one, and this is really just because we talked the Clemson game. Clemson plays Florida State next weekend, but Florida State got trounced by SMU. And it's kind of ironic because both Clemson and Florida State are in kind of court or legal proceedings with the ACC trying to get out. And Florida State was essentially saying, SMU's below us. And I can't think of a bigger drop off for a football program than the Florida State Seminoles.
It's crazy.
I really, truly don't know what is going on. The fact that, and you can go back to the transfer portal where like you live and die by that. it's not always going
They
to work
still
out
shouldn't be
for you.
this, but they still shouldn't be this bad. You
I
know,
mean,
you can say, and I get it. It makes a lot of sense that you say like you're constantly changing players in and out. There's no
mhm,
consistency within the program of players playing with each other. But to go from we should be in the national championship or we should be in the playoffs
yeah,
to we can't barely win a game,
yeah,
or what, they won one game this year.
and barely.
Exactly. So to go 13-0 to 1-4, and the team that you beat, they ain't no good either.
Nope.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think I've ever seen a drop off like this within just a year span.
And honestly, I don't think, obviously DJ Uyunglele is not the sole problem.
Right.
I feel like there's a lot more issues. And Game Day kind of talked about this, and we've talked about this before, but it's like
How
the
long
more
do you stick with him?
the more we get into the portal era and everything, the more I tend to start agreeing with Dabo and his stance, where it's like,
Yeah.
if you have players that you just rotate year in and year out, and you don't have a core that have bought into what your philosophy is or what you want to build your program off of, it's not going to be successful. It doesn't matter if you bring in the DJ got a big bag to come to Florida State and it just hasn't worked out for them. And at some point you have to call a spade and say, okay, what we're doing is not working. Is there anything we can do to fix the trajectory that we're on? And it was an anomaly last year. I don't think Mike Norvell is a great coach. He produced mediocrity up until last year, where they kind of struck lightning in a bottle, with Jordan Travis, Keon Coleman, and they did lose a lot last year. But there should never be, if you're a great college football team or you want to be a great college football team, you just don't fall off like you have this year.
Right.
And it's bad. They lost 42-16 to SMU.
Yeah, I think that there's polar opposites there too, between Dabo not using the portal at all and Florida State kind of constantly wanting to build through the portal. If you do it the right way, which a lot of teams do, and South Carolina I think is one of them, where
I agree.
You have your core, you make sure that you build your core through your recruiting. So you go out and you get the high school guys and you put an emphasis on that, and then you say, look, these are the weak spots where we don't necessarily feel comfortable with true freshmen having to fit the bill at all these positions. So let's go find us some guys that are experienced. They're not going to come in and just want a big load of money to come here. Let's go get some guys that have experience in college football that can help us in the meantime while we go and get our core guys, our youngsters, and build them around them. I think that teams like Alabama and Georgia and the South Carolinas, they're doing it the right way, where they're saying, look, we know we got to build our recruits. We got to go and get the recruits. We got to build a core, but you can fill in some weak spots. It's kind of the same thing with the NFL. If you have certain teams that just go and grab free agents every year, it doesn't necessarily always work. Or if you have a team that says we're going to re-sign the guys that we draft, we're going to focus a lot on drafting good players to come in and make an impact. And then we're going to have a free agent or two that helps us in some spots that we know we need immediately.
Yeah. It's almost
That's
like
the best way to do
you're building it through if you're trying to relate to NFL, it's like you're building your core through the draft and getting pieces through free agency that fit what you, or fill in holes that you need.
Exactly.
And so without further ado, I wanted to do this earlier in the week, but sometimes schedules don't always work out. Stephen, there was a lot of drama regarding, and I put the transfer portal because I think it just goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
With UNLV, with their NIL collective and their former quarterback, Matthew, I think it's Sluka. Essentially, we don't really know. There's two sides to the story. There's two sides, and then there's the truth. But essentially what it boils down to is UNLV started their season 3-0. And if a player plays
4 games
in 4 games, no matter if they just play one snap in that 4th game, they can no longer redshirt.
Right.
Well, so UNLV enters coming in this week 3-0. Their starting quarterback, who I think they got from Holy Cross out of the transfer portal, essentially announced that he was foregoing the rest of this season, using his red shirt, and it's centered around an
Non-payment.
NIL, not getting paid what he supposedly says.
Right.
He should have been paid what they agreed to. And it's just been this huge snowball effect. UNLV lost another player, which he said was not related to NIL. And then there's a defensive lineman for USC, and I don't think it was related to NIL either, but it was regarding playing time. And, and it's we're going to focus mostly on the quarterback drama at UNLV. But before we get into it, this is everything that I hate, and you can blame all of this on the NCAA for allowing. They just essentially opened Pandora's box,
right,
and just said, "Have fun, do whatever you want." There's no guardrails, there's no borders you have to fall in. And another thing is this has just created not a generation, but an era where it's like you can essentially just quit on your team. He quit on his team. Now,
he did.
He was promised this money. There's nothing wrong with that, but I don't know. This is everything that I hate with the direction college football is going, where take Xavier Leggett, for example. He probably could have left South Carolina because it didn't really work out, but you look what he did. He stayed. He bought into what Beamer was doing, and he worked hard, and it turned into him being a first-round pick in the NFL draft and getting paid. And I feel like with this, you can just do whatever you want to, essentially. It's just essentially raised a bunch of quitters where if something's not going your way, you just leave. Now, for the quarterback situation at UNLV is completely different, where if he was promised money and he wasn't paid, I kind of understand it. But at the same time, you're still quitting on your team. You're still quitting on these players. And that's the kind of the mantra, especially if you're going to live and die by the portal, where you've got guys coming in that don't really give a rip about you or your players or your program and only care about the money. And this is not what the NIL was designed for.
No.
I'm going to quit ranting. We'll get into more of it, but kind of give me your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I think that and here's the problem with college football too, where a lot of people they're over it at this point. And, you can say, the players in the NFL, when they make X, Y, and Z. Well, here's the thing. We know exactly what they get paid.
Yep.
There's a contract. You know what they're getting paid. You can go and find all of the details of all of these players' contracts, how much they're getting paid, how much is the signing bonus, what will it do to the salary cap. You can find out all this information about what they're paying this player.
Yep.
With the NIL, we don't know. And the other thing, it sounded like, I think Reese Davis talked about it on game day, where he said, it almost sounds like this was a handshake deal. Like there was no contract where, it was legally binding, where you say, okay, you're going to come and play at UNLV for at least 1 year, and we're going to pay you $100,000. This is the contract. You sign it. At that point, he could take legal action if he wasn't getting paid. But it was kind of like a handshake deal. And that's what Reese Davis said. He was like, look, if that's the case, like if they were supposed to pay you and you didn't get paid, but you don't have anything legally binding that to them, like it's a mistake on your end as well for just blindly going into this.
Yeah. And I think that's another issue, that this has nothing to do with the universities. Like the university can't say, Steven, you come to our school, we're going to pay you $100,000. That's against the rules.
Yeah.
The NIL was it's for what the acronym is: name, image, and likeness. It's for you to benefit off your name.
Right.
And now you can get into all the money these schools make, but I'm talking NIL, name, image, and likeness. It gives you the ability, Steven, if you go to wherever you went, is when you played college football at North Greenville, and a dealership came up to you, say, Steven, we're going to pay you X, Y, and Z to represent our dealership. We're going to give you a car, but in return, you have to do X, Y, and Z.
Commercials.
Whether that's going to,
autograph signing,
autograph session at the dealership, or appearing in commercials. But again, there's nothing official with it. There's no regulation. It's just what everything that was illegal about college football is now legal, where it's just like you live on a farm and somebody drops a big duffel bag of cash, and it's like, me as a booster, Steven, like, hey, come here. I'm going to make sure you get all this X, Y, and Z. There's nothing official about it where there needs to be something official with it, where it's like me as a business owner approaches Steven. Okay. Hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm willing to pay. Okay. That then gets sent to whoever, the collective or whatever, and to the university. Then it gets submitted to the NCAA or whoever, where there has to be something official. Because like I said, if he was promised it and they kind of recanted on it, that's a crappy thing to do. But again, there's just no regulation around this, and it's just going to keep happening where these players are going to, the days of a player coming to your school because they love the program, they love the coach, whatever, that doesn't exist anymore, where if you don't give them what they're promised, they have no ties. They don't care. They have no emotional attachment to your school, and they're just going to jet and bolt because there's nothing. And I was watching another recap where I think everything is just kind of bubbling, getting close to the top, where that volcano is just going to erupt, and we're going to enter into an era of college football where it's just it's not going to be. We're getting further and further away from what I love about college football compared to the NFL.
Yeah.
And again,
and that's why when people ask me like, "Oh, you watch it?" Like I used to love watching college football, and it's just like now I lean more toward the NFL because, well, one, there's less teams to keep up with. They're mainly playing at the same times, and two, as much as you want to say about what these guys make in the NFL, you know what they're making.
Yeah,
they know that the teams are making billions of dollars off of them, but they're getting paid what they believe is fair, what their agents think is fair, and everybody knows. Everybody that watches it, you can go and find out what Joe Blow is making to be a field goal kicker or whatever you want to find out. So, and there is none of this just leave in the middle of the season. I'm players in the NFL, they do sit out during contract negotiations and stuff like that, but most of the time it gets worked out.
But guess what? They have a contract, so for every day those players don't show up, they're lose fined. Money. Yeah. They lose money.
Exactly. Like that's Hassan Reddick right now for the Jets. He's Hassan Reddick. He's losing like $100,000 or so every week that he doesn't show up in this contract holdout that he's doing. But even in this situation with the quarterback from UNLV, that makes it seem kind of sketchy and dirty is that apparently another booster or donor offered to pay the $100,000 that was promised if the quarterback if he would continue to play, and he turned it down. So that makes me think like, okay,
no, he didn't. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. He didn't reject it. The university said no, we're not dealing with this family anymore. And I think what kind of transpired after that into they played yesterday, right? I don't think his teammates really truly liked him.
Right.
They brought in two quarterbacks. I just
think there's something outside of he didn't get this money that he was promised. I think there's something else going on. I think there's, obviously they, came out the gates hot at UNLV.
Yeah.
He's playing well. Obviously, with no rules, who's to say that another
he
school
wasn't
hasn't already
playing that. He wasn't playing that well. That's the thing. Like
it just seems like something dirty is going on here outside of I was promised $100,000. They didn't pay me $100,000 because when the university is coming out and they're like, we're not dealing with this family anymore, and the players seem like they didn't like them, and it's just like, all right, somebody did offer to pay, and the school obviously rejected. Because if they were like worried about this kid and his money and wanting to keep him there, they would have said, hey, yeah, casino, you got it, pay it. But there's something else going on.
Yeah, like I said, there's two sides to every story, and then there's the truth. And again, the issue is he had an agent representing him. So there's a lot of different rumors flying around where they're blaming the agent for not getting everything in writing. Like, I'm sorry, there's no way to prove that we know of what is being is said is true, where they promised him X, Y, and Z. There's also a rumor that another school offered him more money to come. That's tampering. And I don't know. And people are going to argue that these universities make all this money with the conference and the TV, which is completely true. But one thing that's different with the NCAA or universities compared to like any other professional sport, the MLB, NBA, whatever, majority of other sports at these universities don't make money. They're
Right.
in the red. So
Football funds the other sports.
so a lot of the money all that money that football generates helps
Right.
fund all the other sports
Yeah.
at these universities. And I just don't know it. I just don't know a way for it to work out that way where these universities, it's easy to say, hey, yeah, the university should be paying them. And you're kind of seeing it happen at Tennessee where they're increasing their ticket prices, where that percentage goes towards their players. Is that sustainable? Probably so, as long as your team is good.
Yeah.
But
The
if
other
your
thing
team,
is like people still forget that, you know, these guys are going to school for free for the most part. You
yeah,
do have your walk-ons, you know, that aren't getting scholarship, but they go into it agreeing to play football for no scholarship money.
yeah,
And you know, whether you want to say, well, that's whether that's enough or not, like you got people that are playing football right now and now getting paid
yeah,
who are getting a free education where another kid is going to be in student debt,
hmm,
you know, loans for
yeah,
20 or 30 years, and you're getting it for free. So you are getting compensated something. You're
yeah,
getting free housing, you're getting free tuition, you're getting free, you know, meals, all this stuff. Now,
yeah,
whether to say that's, you know, fair and comparable to what the university is making off of what they do in the field,
yeah,
you can argue that.
yeah.
But to say like, oh, they're getting nothing, and again, they football makes money and these guys make it for them. But like you said, pretty much all sports at a university, none of them are generating enough money to fund that sport.
I
Maybe
think there's,
men's college basketball at certain programs or
yeah,
is
I think there's like two or three, like you can count on one hand.
right,
But my issue is we've gone from before you even consider the NIL, where the whole argument was players should be able to make names, or excuse me, make
correct.
money off their name, image, and likeness. You know, with Johnny Manziel signing the autographs,
Hmm.
or somebody again wanting to pay
Putting them in
another
a
player,
video
like,
game.
hey, we're going to give you this free car to drive for the year or
Yeah,
however long your contract is for, and you agree to do X, Y, and Z.
correct.
Where it's now where it seems like the players have all the control the way these universities are going to run. I mean, you've got high school kids who are 17, 18 years old saying, listen, I'm not even going to consider coming to your school unless you guarantee I'm getting mid to low six figures to even come onto campus. Then you
Right.
have to factor in the NIL, and that's not what it was intended for.
Yep.
And like the NCAA needs to, or somebody, whether if it's college football, the Power Five conferences or whoever have to. I think the only way it's ever going to work is they're going to have to branch off and do their own thing, like the NFL. It's
Yeah.
what it's going to be probably within the next decade, because there's no other way to regulate. The NCAA's already basically said free range, do whatever you want.
You
You
can't
can't,
put the toothpaste
can't
back
reel
in.
it back in once you've already allowed it to open.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. My issue with it. I think players should be able to make all the money they are able to.
Hmm.
Like nobody's showing up to see the long snapper for Coastal Carolina. Like they're showing up to see the playmakers. They're
Right.
showing up to see the Cade Klubniks at Clemson, the Phil Moffas at Clemson, the Lenore Sellers and Rocket Sanders at South Carolina. They're not showing up to see the backup center.
Right.
And there has to be a fine line that has to be drawn because another thing is us as the fans, and this is I think what really irked Carolina fans with Juice Wells, were like, it's up to the fans to pay the money, or unless
Yeah.
you
That's
just
the
have
other
rich
thing is like
donors, you have a rich alumni fan base where somebody maybe spending $20 a month to fund an NIL collective at Clemson or at Arkansas or whoever, but there's no regulation, there's no contract signed where it's like, okay, you're agreeing to come here, you're getting X, Y, and Z, you're guaranteed to stay here for at least 2 years, and
right.
if you want to leave, because the whole argument is, well, coaches can leave whenever they want to. That is true, but if Shane Beamer were to leave South Carolina to go take the
Just pay a
head coaching
buyout.
job at USC, USC has to buy out his contract. So if you want
Right.
to leave, that's fine. But that school you're going to has to buy out, or you have to buy out your contract.
Yeah. And there
And
should
that's
be
just
stuff too where it just like the Juice Wells situation, like there's word is like that he was medically cleared, but nobody can say for 100% certain. Like
yeah,
if you have that in writing, like look, if you are injured and you
yeah,
cannot play and the training staff does not clear you to play, yes, we will honor our
yeah,
agreement to what we're supposed to pay you.
hmm
But from everything that has been said is like he was medically cleared and then just chose not to play and then still took the money and then ran.
yeah,
And I think that's really, again, it's not that he ran that pisses people off, but it's the fact that from everything that we don't know if it's 100% true or not that if he was medically cleared, but from everything that people know, he was medically cleared to play and didn't. That's really what makes people mad.
yeah.
And
Again,
here's the thing: when you have contracts, you have all that kind of stuff in. Just like
yeah,
in the NFL, you have certain things like if you don't show up, you're fined. If you only play a certain amount of snaps, you only
hmm
get whatever it is. It's the same thing. If you only have a certain amount of PTO and you need you get sick one day or something and you got to miss work, well, you just don't get paid for that day. Like
yeah. And that's the
it
issue
shouldn't just
where
be a clear cut. We're going to pay you $100,000 where you play one snap or you play every snap or whatever it is. Like there's
yeah,
got to be more stuff in writing, more regulations. But like you said, the NCAA already let it be free reign. There's no way for them to rein it back in. The only way the only way to do that is like you said, a certain amount of teams, the Power Five, whatever, just breaks off and
yeah,
says, all right, this is a new league. And once we
hmm
start this new league, this is the rules and regulations on how you get paid.
yeah. And I know I my my only thing is if a player, like if you committed to go play at South Carolina because you truly loved, whether it be the quarterback coach, the offensive coordinator, or the head coach. I think if there's a change made at those positions that directly affects you, I think
Yeah,
you should be allowed to leave. Like if Lenore Sellers committed to South Carolina because Dow Loggins was the offensive coordinator and Loggins gets fired or he gets a head coaching job, I think players should be able to leave for that reason.
sure.
Like if you've committed to play under a certain regime, head coach regime, or whoever, and they leave or get fired or whatever, you should be able to leave with them.
Yeah,
This whole thing of like, okay, Steven's going to Kentucky this year. Well, you know what? I want to go, and I think you're only allowed to do it once, but then you can be a graduate transfer, which is what Juice Wells did.
right.
Um, so again, I have no problem or qualm with you wanting to go try to be on a better football team, but don't hide behind certain things to kind of justify your actions. Just be
Right.
honest. Like
Yeah.
I respect honesty. Like I may not like it, but at the end of the day, you can respect it a lot more than trying to do X, Y, and Z to try to get your way out of a predicament. Um, so yeah, it's just
At the end of the day, the Slucker guy or whatever, he quit. He quit on his team. He's a
mhm,
quitter. And
yep. And
and
you're
I think it's if I'm a coach at another program and I see that, I don't want that. I don't want that on my team.
yeah.
Like if you're going to try and transfer here,
And again, it's not like he was this world changing quarterback.
right?
Like I mean, their offense, the other quarterback that UNLV brought in came from Campbell, which is just right up the road from where
Yep.
we are. And their offense looked really good. It's telling when other players chime in on the team, and it kind of reading between the lines where they're glad he's gone.
Yeah.
Where it's all about me, 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 and not we, and that's what I love about college football, where it's you have that. This isn't their job, whereas in
Right.
the NFL it's your job. So I think it does affect locker rooms in the
Yeah.
NFL. It does, but I think there's a different understanding of it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, with college football compared to the NFL, this money's not coming from South Carolina. It's not coming from Clemson. It's these NIL collectives that are associated with the school.
Yeah.
So unless there's just some
Again, the other
law and
thing
order
with
surrounding it, it's just never going to be sustainable.
yeah, but again, with even when you have like contract disputes in the NFL, like I'm sure the players don't like it. Like when CeeDee Lamb's holding out, like, yeah, the locker room doesn't like it, but at the end of the day, they understand like business is business. Like
Yeah.
he's got to do what he's got to do. And here's the thing: is like when he signs that contract, they know what he was holding out for. Like,
Yeah.
These guys in your college locker room, they might not know unless you're telling them. But as a quarterback, you might not know what Nicky Menwar is getting paid unless he comes and tells you. And he could, be sitting out or saying he doesn't want to practice because he's not getting paid. Well, we don't know how much he's getting paid. Is he doing this because he's not getting paid $4 million or 40,000 or 4,000 this week? We don't know. Nobody knows.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it's not like I said, the universe. Like, I don't know. Like, it should be like, hey, you come here, we're gonna get you in touch with our NIL collective or whoever. They're gonna open up all these opportunities. We have these businesses. But it's all about what can you give me now, and I think what you're going to end up seeing is where these athletes are going to get like a base pay, and then there's going to be performance objectives where they get a bonus, like, hey, we're going to give you guaranteed 75 grand this year, or this donor is going to give you or donate all this money, and it's going to get divvied up this way, and if you meet these performance objectives, you get more money. But it's just it's like a pay for play, and that's illegal.
So there's so much that would come into that too, because you look at the NFL, they have a salary cap that they have to stay within, and they have 53 players. And then on a college team, you could have 100 to 120 people, and then what do you say? Like, all right, do they have to be deemed on scholarship to be able to receive the base pay? Or does everybody receive it if you make the team? And, if Beamer says, all right, this guy's on our team, he's part of the base pay, he gets the $50,000. Well, that's, 50,000, 75,000 times 100 to 120.
Yeah.
And again, on an NFL team, those 53, they're most likely getting in the game at some point for the most part. So they are actually – and then in college, you might have a guy that's on the team for 4 years and never sees the field once. He's just there. He's getting scholarship. He's getting education. And then now you're going to give him $50,000, and he might get in against, Furman or somebody like that at the very end of the game. But he's just going to make $50,000 this year because he's a practice body.
And another thing is, and it's just like this in the NFL, each position has a higher market than the other. Again, nobody's showing up. I'm sorry, Kai Kroger is probably one of the best punters in the country. Nobody's showing up to watch him.
Right.
And so it's like, there's more players that have to be paid in college compared to the NFL. How do you determine who gets what? Again, paid? It's just the wild, wild west right now, and you can't rein it in because you just allowed everything to happen. And again, I'm all for players being able to make money off who they are. Like, that university is going to make money, the same amount of money, whether you're at that school or not.
Correct.
Like, you leave, somebody else is coming in, they're still getting that same amount of money. So it's not like somebody coming to your school is just generating all this interest, and it's causing all these cable networks to come see you. Like, they're going to make it regardless if you're there or not, but you should be able to make money off of your name, image, and likeness, which is what the NIL is.
Correct.
So it's just, we could talk for hours on this. I think we've got kind of made our points.
There's just so many rules that would have to go into it. And I think the rules and regulations, it would have to be even more than the NFL, because like I said, there's just so many players. And then again, where do you determine what the market value is? Like, because right now you kind of know, like you said, in NFL, each position, you can pay them whatever you want to technically. Yeah. But there is a market value for quarterbacks. There's a market value for,
and it gets reset every year when somebody gets paid.
And basically agents look at who are the top 5 at this position in salary, and then that median is basically the market value. Now you can reset that, just like if you said, all right, a quarterback's market value was $52 million, but Dak got 60. Well, he just kind of reset the market a little bit, and it does go up a little, but it's within that range.
Yeah.
Where do you even start? Because Shadur Sanders is getting like $9 million apparently, and then you got like Jackson Dart is getting $2 million. You don't even have like a market to say like this is what a quarterback would be.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing is, like, in the NFL, there's 32. You get 32 starting quarterbacks. In college, there's 160.
Yeah. There's 32 in 2 conferences combined.
Right, exactly. So there's so much that would go into it. It should have just been you get your scholarship from the school.
Yep.
If you can go and negotiate deals with a bank, with with McDonald's or whatever, to do commercials and stuff and make money off of your name, where you actually do something for a
Business.
business or an entity or something like that. Or if you say, look, I've got a design, I've got my own website, I'm selling T-shirts like Spencer Rattler had.
Yep.
He was making money off his name, image, or likeness. But instead now it's just throw money in a pot, and that pot says, okay, we'll pay this guy $1 million to come here. They don't even have to do anything to play football. That's not name, image, and likeness. That's just paying players.
Yeah, and it's pay for play, which is illegal.
Right.
And South Carolina, and I think it was South Carolina and Southern Cal that did this, and like South Carolina partnered with this. It was either a marketing agency or a sports marketing agency. I think they're based out of Greenville, which is they were gonna the athletes were gonna have access to these agencies, and then they would help kind of
deals,
shop them around to get NIL deals.
Just like Lenore Sellers this past weekend.
See,
they had a bye week.
The NCAA deemed that illegal. That's the thing.
Stupid.
Like you can
That's
do whatever you
should
want
be.
to. Yeah, and I know South Carolina just recently partnered up with, I forgot what the company is, but it's like a media. It's like called 1801 Media now, where it's like if players want to start a podcast or stuff like that, or do like I know they did a video with it's like a fishing trip between the football and the basketball team, like certain players, and they were all wearing a specific brand. So I'm just only going to assume that brand sponsored that video or whatever. Right. But that's what it's intended for. Not like, okay, well, South Carolina offered me $200,000, Clemson, what can you do for me? And that's not what NIL should be. And that's what it should never be, because that's not what it's intended for.
Yeah, it should be you go to a school and then you generate income based off of other things, endorsements, basically, to do. And it's just like, go do a commercial, or do like Lenore Sellers did this past weekend. He had a bye week. Go do a meet and greet through Anderson Brothers Bank and stuff like that. That's how it was intended to be.
And I think you see how good name, image, and likeness is with the female sports. Like you look at some of the most popular athletes are like Livy Dunn, that is on the LSU gymnastics team, the Cavender twins.
Going and doing commercials,
like
stuff like that.
I know they're good at their sport and their craft, but that's the benefit of NIL. Like they made their like own following or whatnot, because it's not football. Right. And Livy Dunn's got an apparel deal with Viore. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
She's got all these brand deals. That's what NIL is intended for.
Right.
Not like, okay, you need to at least give me $165,000 for me to even show up to your school.
Right.
So we could talk for hours on this. Before we get out of here,
because the thing is, last point, these businesses know like what a value is that you could bring. They know, okay, if we pay you $20,000, I'm going to get that in return.
Yeah.
Because we know what the market deems.
And brand
we do
exposure.
This with other things. We know what commercials do. We know what, social media posts can generate.
Yeah.
So I know that if I pay you this, I'm going to have a return on that investment.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whereas you don't know, like if a quarterback comes out of high school and he says, I need $2 million to play here, you might suck in college. And now we're stuck giving you $2 million.
Yeah.
So
that's not what it should be intended for.
Right.
But I do want to give a shout out, because we do cover his team. Xavier Leggett caught his first NFL touchdown pass today. So shout out Mullins Auctioneers. For our high school show, it's going to be dropping Wednesday night instead of Tuesday night this week, because with the weather this past weekend, we've got two teams playing tomorrow. We got the Marion and Mullins Tobacco Bowl game, and then Dillon Christian School is traveling to Hilton Head tomorrow at 4 p.m. to take on Hilton Head Prep. So we'll still have our episode this week, but it's going to be uploaded on Wednesday, hopefully, instead of Tuesday this week, just because we won't be able to record until after those games are finished. So it wouldn't be, to set, do that to Zeb. Steven, anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think that basically covers it.
Yeah. So, but thank y'all. If you haven't and you're watching, please like the channel, follow us, subscribe on YouTube, follow the page on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. I'm going to put our handles and everything right here before we get out of here. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. We post more on Facebook, but we're active on Twitter as well. We're live on YouTube. But again, thank y'all for tuning in today. And it was a little bit longer of an episode, but there's a lot that happened in college football this week.
Yep.
And then we'll see y'all on Wednesday, and then we'll be back live next Sunday. Y'all have a good day.